Now, the book of Job, part 1, Christ Our Sufficiency. I'm going to show you a few things. Of course, 42 chapters, we can't cover them all. But as long as mankind has existed, there's been suffering. Because there's sin in the world, some suffering is understandable, but some of it isn't. It's hard to understand, for example, why 17 million people starve to death every year on this planet. 60,000 people starve to death today. I mean, now I'm not talking about run over by cars and shot and blown up and all the other bad stuff. Cancer, AIDS, they starve today. 60,000. What's Broken Arrow? They had to do Broken Arrow in a couple, 1 day, 2 days. I don't know how many people live out there where we live. Can you imagine that many people starving today? I mean, where do they bury them all? You know what I mean? We're talking about major, and this is year in, year out. There's nothing big going on. This is normal in the world. 17 million people starve to death on this planet, and the vast majority of them are children. They can't fight for the food as well as the big people. That's a constant question that people ask about why did things like that happen? Why does God allow that kind of suffering? Well, Job tells us why. It gives us God's perspective, the secret of suffering from God's great sovereignty. What does this book primarily reveal about God? Well, one name of God is used more in this book than anywhere else in the Bible. 43 times, God is called El-SHADDAI. El is God. Shaddai means the all-sufficient one. That's why I call the title of this book, Christ Our Sufficiency. Jesus is revealed as our Redeemer. Jesus is revealed as El-SHADDAI, as the one who is enough. That's the kind of the simple way to say sufficiency. He's the God who is enough. He's all we need. That's when he said, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That's another way of saying he's all we need. He's sufficient. We can relate to suffering. You might have lost a loved one. You might have lost your parents. You might have lost a child, your mate, a friend, a fellow worker. You can lose jobs and marriages and dreams and money and health and home and security. And we can react in different ways. We can be in shock or denial or panic or anger or despair or bitterness or resentment. Or, if we understand this book, when things we don't understand come, we can be accepting of them, submitting to God's wisdom, trusting Him, and growing through it. Well, let me just give you 3 lessons before I jump into the book, because I don't want you to miss this. 3 lessons we can learn from Job. Number 1, pleasing God should be our goal in life, not happiness, comfort, or satisfaction. Our goal in life is not to have the most comfortable nest. Our goal in life is not to get the most stuff. Our goal in life is not to be absolutely in pleasure and happiness all the time. Our goal in life is to please God. That's why that's in the Bible all the way through. Pleasing God. Pleasing God and making disciples. The 2 things we're here for. We're constantly to be pleasing God, and along the way we are to be pointing people to Him and taking them with us. Pleasing God and making disciples. Number 1, the first lesson of Job is pleasing God should be our goal in life. He pleased God when he was rich. He pleased God when he buried his 10 kids when they were all killed. He pleased God when his wife turned her back on him. He pleased God when he was scraping his body of boils. He pleased God when God doubled everything he had. He pleased Him on every channel. That's the first lesson. You can write, if you're taking notes, Job 5:17. Behold, happy is the man whom God corrects. Therefore despise not the chastening of the Lord Almighty. He makes sore. Verse 18, he binds up, he wounds. His hands make whole. Job 5:19, he'll deliver thee in 6 troubles. Yea, in 7, no evil will touch thee. In other words, if anything bad happens to you, it's all right. Because God let it. I mean, it's not like he ever goes, oh, that assassin got past me. You know, they got the gun into the airport. I didn't know it. Or that microbe got into your bloodstream. Or your blood, that your transfusion was, I didn't know that, terrible contagion and you're going to get AIDS. When I was at Grace, one of the elders at Grace, his brother died of AIDS. I mean, he was as straight as they come. This is one of those transfusion deaths. And you say, how come? How come the Red Cross didn't get it? Well, I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter if the Red Cross got it. How did God let it go through? Well, that's what this whole book's about. Nothing gets by God. That's why there are no disappointments for Christians, only the appointments of God. We have to see that, God's hand, all the way through life. And life is so much better when we understand that. And he says in verse 20, in famine I'll redeem you from death, in war from the power of the sword. Well, what about the people that die and get killed? He didn't want to. It's to His glory that they die then. And that's something that we don't understand. And so what we do, in fact, Deuteronomy 29:29 says we're never going to understand it. It's a secret. how everything fits together, how God's chosen people can be the most killed people on earth, the Jews. How come Christians suffer most of the time, except in our era? They're not suffering as much as normal, but it's coming back soon. But how those things connect, it doesn't connect. It's up here, God's part, and we see our part. And that's why God says you're not going to understand it now. So what do? Well, 1 Corinthians 10:31, whether therefore you eat or drink or whatever you do, sick, dying, poor, whatever, do all to the glory of God. 2 Corinthians 5:9, whether you labor, therefore we labor, whether present or absent, we may be accepted of Him. Life is pleasing God, not happiness, pleasure, or whatever else. Second principle Job teaches us. Following God, the first one was pleasing God. Following God usually consists of losing precious possessions and suffering pain for His sake. That's normal. Okay, if you want to know what normal Christianity is, normal Christianity, which says, I will follow you, entails experiencing loss and pain. Now, you won't hear that on most Christian television shows, because people won't send their $10 in if you tell them that. That's not something that people want to hear. People don't want to hear that following God usually entails losing things most precious to us and suffering pain for His sake. But look at Job 23. You want to see it in Job 23, verse 8. Behold, I go forward, but He's not there. I go backward, I can't perceive Him. Verse 9, on the left hand, where He doth work, but I can't behold Him. He hideth Himself. On the right hand, I can't see Him. Do you see his frustration? He's going, God, what are you doing? What's going on here? It's hard. But look at verse 11. My foot hath held His steps. His way I've kept and not declined. Neither have I gone back from the commandment of His lips. I have esteemed the words of His mouth more than my necessary food. How did Job please God in great prosperity, in great tragedy of losing his family, in great adversity of personal illness, in great affliction of all of his friends and wife being against him, and then finally in prosperity? And how did he please God? It's right there. There's a secret. I have esteemed, Job 23:12, I have esteemed, I have valued, I have treasured the words of His mouth more than my necessary food. He says, my life consists of what Christ said. My meat is to do the will of Him that sent me. He says, that's when I'm feeding the best. When I do God's will, when I obey His word. Well, verse 14, He performeth the thing that is appointed for me, and many such things are with Him. He says, God's doing it all. And if God's going to take it all away, what did Job say? The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away what? Blessed be the name of the Lord. There you know you've caught it, if you can say that. The Lord gave me my good health, the Lord took it away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. The Lord gave me prosperity, the Lord took it away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. The Lord gave me whatever, wonderful family, the Lord took them away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Point number 3 of the enduring lessons of Job. One was pleasing God should be our goal in life, not pleasure, comfort, satisfaction. Number 2, following God usually costs us possessions and pain. Finally, trusting God will turn our present, what it looks like a loss to us, into future great gain. Trusting God turns what looks like a loss today into, in heaven, a great gain in the future. Now, that's what the book of Job's all about. I mean, he lost his health, his property, his children. But God doubled them on earth, and he had twice as many kids. He had 10 in heaven and 10 on earth. He doubled everything. What a wonderful God we serve. A good verse on that is Job 42, if you want to turn there. Verse 10. It says, and the Lord turned the captivity of Job when he prayed for his friends. Also, the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. And it talks in verse 12, the Lord blessed the latter end of Job more than the beginning, for he had 14,000 sheep. Wow. Look at verse 17. Job died being old and full of days. Now, God chose in His sovereignty to give him double here on earth. God might not choose that with us. God said, though, I'll give you 100-fold in heaven. I'd rather have it in heaven anyway. Might lose it here, might get messed up, might get proud here. Just briefly, about Satan. Satan is more clearly shown in Job than nearly any other part of the Bible. Verse 13, Satan can affect nations on earth. It says in verse 15, the Sabaeans attacked and took some of his livestock. The Sabaeans? Yeah, Satan prompted those people to come and attack Job. They could have attacked anybody. They went after Job. They wouldn't have normally come after Job. Job was a very, very powerful man. But God pulled back his protective aura around Job's life and allowed Satan to move the nations against him. Secondly, Satan has power not only over the nations, but he has power over nature. Think about that. Verse 16, it says there that while he was still speaking, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep. That wasn't the fire of God. That was the fire of Satan. But they thought it was the fire of God because it was from heaven. And Satan had power over nature. And a little bit later, look, a tornado comes. Verse 19, a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the four corners and killed all of his kids. And Satan has power over the nations. He can move the Hitlers and the Genghis Khans of this world at will. He also, at God's leave and God's allowance, and also he can move in nature. Satan was trying to drown Jesus in the boat. He was sleeping. He said, I got him now. I'm going to drown him. And Jesus just stood up, and nature obeys the Creator before the usurper. And finally, Satan has power over our bodies, over the natural man, when God allows it, because Satan went out in chapter 2, verse 7, and struck Job with painful boils. He did not have a bacteria. He did not have a condition. He had Satan's direct attack on his natural man, on his body. That's why prayer, Paul said, pray that the gospel will have free course, that we'll be able to do this. Pray that Satan won't thwart us, put a roadblock in the way. Sometimes Satan brings perpetual weakness. He brings sickness, not because of God's chastening, just because that's part of his plan, and that's part of what we have to pray for. And I'm not saying health, wealth, and prosperity. What I'm saying is that we have to pray. A lot of times missionaries, I read those letters and I see it says, Billy was sick all this week, and Sally was sick all this week, and Tommy was sick all this week. And I wonder if we're praying enough for them, or if the darkness that they're in, that Satan and his minions are attacking them, because sometimes we're just not upholding them. That's why Paul asked, more than he asked for money, he asked for prayer. It's not always true nowadays, is it? We're more aware we need more money than we are more prayer. Maybe that's why we don't get as much done as they used to get done. What about sin? Last thing I want to tell you about Job. This book teaches us some principles about sin. Sin cuts off communication with God. Sin grieves God. Sin sickens the unrepentant. Sin invites the discipline of God. Sin leads to death if we persistently continue in unrepentant sin. New Testament affirms all of those things. So what we should do is focus on God's hand in our lives and see that our goal in life is to be pleasing Him, not ourselves. And our goal in life is to see that investing in Him might be on the short haul look like we're losing, but in the long haul we gain.